Good evening. My name is Jaquana Orr, and I'm the president of the Black Law Students Association here at the University of Connecticut School of Law. And I would like to welcome you to BOSS's annual Night of Inspiration, and take this opportunity to thank all of our sponsors without whom this event would not have been possible. The Crawford Bar Association, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Connecticut Bar Association, the University of Hartford Pre-Law Department, the University of Connecticut Diversity and Inclusion, UConn's Hartford campus, and UConn's Law School campus. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our Vice President, Khadijah Kelly, whose hard work and determination made this event successful. I would like to thank all of our speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come and speak with us today. I would lastly like to thank all of you tonight for coming out and coming to this event tonight. Each year, Night of Inspiration has a different theme. This year's theme is the destruction of the Black body, stunted growth of the Black community through healthcare, criminal justice, and education. We have chosen our themes over the years for various different reasons, whether they be enlightenment, upliftment, or to shed light on different issues within our community. For years, with the recent events, this theme is very relevant. For years, we have been told that racism has ended, that slavery was so long ago, and that we should just get over it, that uneasy feeling that we often feel was all in our heads, while systematic racism cut through our community. Our community continues to suffer from the lack of access to affordable healthcare, the mass incarceration, and the lack of funding within our education system. Our speakers will elaborate on these issues. Before Night of Inspiration, BOSSA came together for a project to promote Night of Inspiration within the UConn Law School campus. If you look around on the sidewalks as you walked in, you would see body silhouettes. And what those were meant to demonstrate were the destruction of the Black body, both literally and figuratively. Now I'll introduce our speakers. Our keynote speaker is Shaun King, writer, civil rights activist. He is noted for his use of social media to promote religious, charitable, and social causes, including the Black Lives Matter movement. For our panelists, we have Dr. Ayana Jordan, who will touch upon the healthcare system. She is assistant professor at Yale and an attending physician at the Connecticut Mental Health Center. She has done extensive research in mental illness, substance use, stigma, and has served as an expert witness discussing such issues. Our next panelist is Professor Mikail DeVeaux, who will discuss the criminal justice system. He is an adjunct professor at the Silberman School of Social Work in Hunter's College. He is also the co-founder and executive director of Citizens Against Recidivism, Inc., and directs Citizens Muslim Reentry Initiative. Dr. DeVeaux has over 3 decades of experience with men and women impacted by the criminal justice system. Our last panelist is Dr. Robyn Brown-Manning, and she will discuss the education system. She dedicates her practice to corporate social services, education institutions, and areas of personal growth, parent education, leadership development, cultural diversity, workforce management. She is a licensed social worker, consultant, and lecturer. Our moderator for tonight is Joelle Murkison. She is the Associate Vice President of the Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Connecticut. She serves as Director, Trustee on the boards of Amistad Center for Art and Culture, Diversity, the Discovery Center, and College Possible. She's also a member of the Board of Ambassadors of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Before we begin, our Dean of the Law School, Dean Timothy Fisher, would like to say a few words. Please welcome Dean Fisher.
Well, thank you so much, Jaquana. I want to start by recognizing the tremendously important role that the Black Law Students Association has served in this law school over the decades. Since its founding in the late 1960s, early 1970s, it's developed a rich history, and generations of leaders in this community and around the country have come out of this organization. And when I became dean here, almost 5 years ago, one of the things I learned very quickly was the incredible strength of this organization in so many dimensions. One that really stood out to me was the degree of leadership development within the Black Law Students Association at UConn Law School. And the tremendous accomplishments of our recent graduates are a pure testimony to that. And indeed, the quality of this program tonight is testimony to that. Because indeed, this is the largest event that will be held at this law school during this school year. And that is a recognition of the work of the leadership and members of BALSA, and of course, the importance of the subject and the speakers that they brought in here tonight. Night of Inspiration is always one of the most important evenings of the year at the UConn Law School, and this is certainly no exception. And indeed, we are truly honored by the panelists who are here this evening through their crucial leadership in this field and in the issue of the destruction of the black body, are showing leadership for the entire country. And the messages we're going to hear tonight are tremendously important. And they also go to the heart of our mission as a law school, because we exist in large part because of the founding creeds of our country, that we are all created equal and that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And those values cannot be true unless we make sure that the law brings it about. We have not achieved that yet. We're going to be studying tonight and hearing tonight some of the greatest failures of the law to protect those core values. And so we are tremendously fortunate as a law school to be able to host this particular conversation. I want to repeat Jaquana's thanks to the organizations that are tremendously important co-sponsors for us, the George Crawford Black Bar Association. Thank you, Garlink Dumont. The University of Hartford. Thank you, Jane Horvath and your colleagues and your students for being here with us. The downtown campus of the University of Connecticut, now just 6 or 7 months old. Dr. Mark Overmeyer-Velasquez, thank you for coming with your group. And of course, the Connecticut Bar Association, under its leadership, our Assistant Dean, Karen DiMiola. I don't know how she does it. Thank you. And the University of Connecticut's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, whose leader, Joelle Murchison, you're going to be hearing from tonight. Before stepping down, I want to add one more personal comment about this event, and that is that we went through a test here on this campus the last few days. As some of you know, but some of you don't, and so I'll tell you about it. Weeks ago, the BALSA leadership came to me with the concept of the silhouettes that are on the ground around these buildings here on this campus. And these are very important to us because they represent the fallen. They represent those who, in their ultimate sacrifice, represent the destruction, the worst form of the destruction we're going to be hearing about tonight. So on Tuesday evening, the BALSA team did the work of laying out the silhouettes. And on Wednesday morning, yesterday morning, we arrived to find that they'd been removed. What we learned was that my office had failed to notify our facilities custodians and public safety team, who, when they arrived on Wednesday morning, under the information known to them, interpreted this as an attack on us. Well, we figured this out promptly. I personally circulated information on the campus about it. I recognized my responsibility for the failure of my office to accomplish that crucial piece of coordination and notified the group, after consulting with BALSA, that we were going to personally go out, Dean DiMiola and I, and reinstall the silhouettes. And what ensued was an outpouring of support from students, faculty, and staff on this campus who wanted to join us in restoring the project, which we had accomplished by 4:30 that afternoon. We learned a lesson obviously we learned a lesson in terms of coordination, which is not the important point here. The important point is twofold. Number one, we happened to achieve perhaps even a greater degree of community engagement on this campus and an awareness of the importance of the message of this event tonight. But also, what I really want to acknowledge is the grace and the professionalism that we've come to expect from BALSA in the way they handled this hurt and this shock and worked with us as we figured out what went wrong and made it right as best we could. And so, Jaquana Orr, Khadijah Kelly, you, your leadership, your e-board, and all your members, I honor you, and I thank you for all you've done to make this a great place. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming out this evening. My name is Joelle Murchison, and I will have the privilege of moderating this esteemed panel. But first, some housekeeping rules for you, and they are not about the restrooms. You are likely sitting on a colored, is that the right language I really want to use? Let's see. A neon pigmented card. They come in multicolors. And so these cards you will use when you come up with your incredibly critical questions that you have for our keynote speaker, Shaun King. Now, the cards that are our typical lined index card are for use for your general questions for our panelists. Okay? Did I clean that up sufficiently? Excellent. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to invite whom to introduce? No, we're not? Okay. Well then. Okay, I thought that Shaun was going to give us some words first before we, excellent. Okay, so the panelists were introduced, but let me very quickly grab my biography of someone who likely needs no introduction. Many of you, if you are like me, are Facebook addicts. I'm just going to admit it. I don't know if this is being recorded or not. Oftentimes at UConn, the programs are recorded, and I have said some interesting things in the past, so why not? I am addicted to Facebook, and I have chosen to receive Shaun's posts first. There is that option, in case you were wondering. You can also block people that you choose not to see. I'm just giving you a little bit of information. And so I think one of the things that has been critical as we've watched the climate in our country change very rapidly over the last 2 years is we have seen the emergence of voices who have been there, but who we may not more largely have been aware of. And Shaun is one of those voices who has clearly spoken truth to power, and who oftentimes makes us aware of the critical issues that are not being covered in the mainstream media. And so I think that for our community in this time, we can consider him as a griot, one who tells the stories that often are not told, but that we need to know. And I'm confident that this evening he will bring his very real and direct brand of courage to us through his conversations. To give you a little bit of background, for those of you who don't know, and I didn't realize this until I read the bio, that he is formerly the senior justice writer at the New York Daily News, which is where I initially became aware of him because of the really groundbreaking work that he did around reporting issues of social justice. He now works as a speaker who has spoken in 35 states, over 100 college campuses. He was sharing with me that he's just been literally in 4 states over the past couple of days, in taking every opportunity possible to share important information with individuals across the spectrum, all demographic groups. As a writer, he's written an astounding 1,500 articles on injustice since 2014 and gives morning commentary on the legendary Tom Joyner Morning Show, heard by 6 million listeners in over 100 cities. So to many of you, Shaun may be new, but he's been on this path his entire life. As a student at Morehouse, was elected as the youngest student government president since Dr. King was a student there in 1947. Prior to his national renown, he was a popular high school history and civics teacher in Atlanta, then a traveling teacher and counselor at a dozen different jails, prisons, and youth detention centers in Georgia. He also started and pastored a church in inner city Atlanta and launched several award-winning social good campaigns. I think what he would say most importantly is he's now based out of Brooklyn, is married to his high school sweetheart, and is the father of 5 children. 4 girls and a boy. I have 4, but with similar age ranges from preschool to high school, so we bonded on that. We are both very grateful to be here without a child present. That is, in fact, a feat. And so without any further ado, I introduce to you Shaun King, our keynote speaker for this evening.
Hello, Connecticut. How are you? Good to see you. I'm glad you got tickets. I didn't know. I think they're like being sold on eBay. And so I'm deeply honored to be here with you. And I have traveled a lot over the past few days, and I was in Montana just a few days ago, and it was 18 below zero. But I got so excited because I looked at the forecast of Connecticut. And I said, wow, it's going to be in the 70s. But I looked at yesterday's forecast. But I had no idea that it could go from 70s to snow. And that's, in some ways, that's so 2018 to be so wildly unpredictable from day to day to day. But I'm glad to be here, honored to be here with you this evening. I'm driving home to Brooklyn tonight for the first time in a week or so, and so I'll be glad to be back home. But I've been looking forward to this. I've actually come to know many of the law students here who are just brilliant. I met many of you are seniors in your 3rd year, about to finish, and I could even see the burden of law school flying off of your shoulders. But I'm proud of those of you who are right there at the finish line. I was actually very moved by Dean Fisher's humbling, poignant remarks about where the school is and where the school is going, and I thank you for that. I'm noticing as I hear my voice on the speakers, my voice is a little deeper and sexier than normal. I have a little bit of a cold, so there's a little Barry White tone going on here that's not. So if you hear me in a couple weeks, it might not sound so sexy, but it is what it is. I'll take it while I have it. But I want to tell you a couple of stories, and I want to teach a lesson, and we'll take questions in our panel, which is just brilliant. We'll discuss many critical issues of the day, and we'll take questions as a panel as well. And after I finish speaking, you'll be able to pass those questions to the team here, and they'll collect those questions. And we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. But you know, a lot of you know me from social media, and I have 2 teenage daughters. I have 4 daughters and a son, and that has changed me in a lot of ways. Being a parent, but being a parent to 4 amazing girls in this time has changed the way I even think of my role as a leader. But I was at we just moved to New York just a year and a half ago, and my daughter had just started at a new high school, a performing arts high school, and I was there, and people know me now, and some students saw me, and I saw them pointing, and they were smiling, and they said, "There's Shaun King." And I had a moment where I realized, like they didn't say Mr. Shaun King, or it wasn't like they put before my name, like was a part of my name. And I realized that for a whole generation of people, they see me as an extension of Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. And so even when I was 5 feet away from them, they saw me as Shaun King. But it reminded me that most of you maybe came to know me just over the past few years, but before you knew me, many moons ago, I was a high school history and civics teacher. And my undergraduate and graduate degrees are in history. And I find myself in these deeply problematic times, I find myself going back to my training, in part because these times are so unsure that it's comforting to lean into what you know well. And so tonight I'm going to lean into my history as a high school history and civics teacher and try to teach a history lesson. Now, this man looks like he might be a founder of the University of Connecticut, but that he is definitely not. He is definitely not that. And I want to teach a lesson about this man, Leopold von Ranke, in just a second. But in 2014, I was not a journalist. That's not what I was doing. I was not even on the path to becoming a journalist. I was a writer for my school newspaper when I was a student at Morehouse. I love writing and always have. But throughout my life, I'd done something very, very different. And in the summer of 2014, I was working at an environmental charity. And I wasn't even doing like environmental justice. We were fighting for green energy. I was in Southern California, and the charity was Global Green. It's an international charity, and our national offices, it was a cushy job. Our offices were on the beach in Santa Monica, and the view was so beautiful that I actually looked forward to going to my cubicle so I could see the ocean. And I got an email in July of 2014 that changed the entire trajectory of my life, and I could not have predicted what that experience did for me. It was from a buddy of mine who knew me from my time at Morehouse, and when I was a student at Morehouse, I was Shaun the activist. Like, I literally owned my own megaphone, and I was so into what I did that I even had an extra battery pack for my megaphone. Like, that's like next level activism is backup battery packs for your megaphone. And I mean, I was the activist who got on most people's nerves. And when I graduated, my wife and I've been with my wife since we were 15 and 16 years old. She went to Spelman, I went to Morehouse, and we knew each other in high school. And we did something incredibly ridiculous. And for those of you who are not yet finished with law school, don't try this at home. We got pregnant. I understood the science of how that happened, but it was not planned. And literally, we were 20 and 21 years old. We were a junior and senior at Morehouse and Spelman, and it changed what I did, and I, in a lot of ways, stopped being Shaun the activist. I immediately got a full-time, I didn't even have a job. I was a full-time student, a student leader. So I got a job. It was right after 9/11. I got a job working airport security because they were hiring anybody. But when I graduated, none of my classmates got the memo that I had stopped being an activist. I didn't stop caring, just my life, the nature of my life changed. And we adopted 2 of our nieces. We had 3 kids of our own. And, I was paying the bills and being a husband and father. We bought a house we couldn't afford and all of the stuff that Americans do. And, but every few months, somebody from Morehouse who didn't get the memo that I had become domesticated, they would send me some story of injustice, and they'd be like, man, what are you going to do about this? Man, you got to say something about this. And I had protested in 1999. I was student government president at Morehouse, and the panel would know this moment well, but in 1999, there was a moment that for me as a teen, I was 19, there was a moment for me that was like my Ferguson moment. The NYPD has shot and killed this brilliant young brother named Amadou Diallo 41 times on the doorstep of his home. And I've come to know Amadou's mother, Kadiatu, and she's like a queen of a woman. And she is seen as the mentor of a painful group of women that people now call the mothers of the movement, but just women who've lost their husbands and sons and daughters to police violence. And a lot of people missed, because there are stereotypes of immigrants, they missed the fact that the Diallo family was a family of great privilege. They had lived all over the world. There's people that assumed that they were poor African immigrants who were struggling in New York. That's not who they were. And she moved the family by choice to New York so her son could get an American education. And they had this squad of goon police officers who called themselves a violent crime squad, and they said that Amadou looked like someone they were looking for. He looked nothing like the person. It was dark and they hardly saw him. They fabricated even that part of their story, it appeared. And they said when they called Amadou's name out, he pulled out his wallet. They said his wallet looked like a gun. It's just making stuff up at this point. And they shot him 41 times right there on the doorstep of his home. And it shaped me in ways that I could not have predicted. And so we protested in Atlanta, where I was in school, and in New York. And so every year after that, stuff would happen and people would say, hey man, what are you going to say about this? And so I got one of those hey man emails in July of 2014. And a buddy of mine who lived in New York said, listen, there is a horrible video on YouTube. Now, you have to understand, and I think history will show this 10 or 20 years from now, these past 4 years have been years of radical shifts and changes and advancements and declines, been 4 tumultuous years. But 4 years ago, you could not post, there was no Facebook Live. You couldn't even upload videos on Twitter at the time, and things that you just see every day now. But 4 years ago, not long ago, you couldn't do this. He said, man, there's a video on YouTube of a middle-aged black man who is begging the police to stop harassing him. And he said, he's just asking them, please, leave me alone. I did not do anything. And he said, all of a sudden, I hadn't seen the video yet. I didn't click on it. He said, an officer comes up behind the man and begins choking him. And my friend said it was like a UFC-style rear naked choke. And he said he pulls the man on the ground, continues to choke him. And the man says over and over and over again, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And I thought that my friend, as he had described it, must have left something out. Like there had to have been, because he described a man who was unarmed, nonviolent, didn't do anything. And I clicked on it, and it was just as my friend had described, but worse. It was horrible. I had protested the shooting death of Amadou Diallo. 7 years later, in 2006, I protested the shooting death of a beautiful young brother named Shaun Bell, whose wife had just had a baby, and his would-be wife just had a baby, and Shaun was literally leaving his bachelor's party in New York when an officer said he thought he saw a gun in Shaun's car, which he didn't. Shaun, his entire life, had never touched a gun, never held a gun, never shot a gun anywhere. And officers then fired 50 bullets into Shaun's car. He's 12 hours away from his wedding, and he's killed right there. But I'd never seen it. I didn't see that. It would have been a horrible thing to see, but I'd never seen it. I had protested just a few years before that when the man tracked and chased and stalked Trayvon Martin and killing him inside of his father's own gated community. But I hadn't seen it. And when I clicked on this video of the man that we came to know as Eric Garner, I can't explain it, but it just shook me up. One, just on the most basic human level, I just saw a man breathe his last breath. Now, what's horrible is since that video, we've seen similar videos many times. But up until that point, one like that had never been shown before. A few weeks later, I quit my job at Global Green, not even really knowing what I was going to do. But as soon as I saw that video, I had the thought, people need to know this story. And here's what I thought, and I was so wrong and stupid. My thought was, if people see this video, someone's going to be held responsible. At my cubicle in Santa Monica, I thought knowledge of the injustice would bring justice. Later that day, I went home and I Googled. It had not gone viral yet. I Googled trying to find out, like, is that legal? Like, is this legal? And I found that the NYPD had banned the chokehold as a policy a decade earlier. It was against policy. It was immoral and unethical. It was illegal. And my thought was, okay, I'm going to dig my feet in. I'm going to make this case known, and someone will be held responsible. I became addicted to sharing that story. I eventually came to know Eric's mother and wife. I became good friends with his daughter, Erica Garner, who just passed away. I was at her funeral. She literally gave her life fighting for her father. She was 29 years old. And I understood that what I saw was wrong, but I believed that someone would be held responsible. Just a few weeks later, I got an email saying that a young man named John Crawford had been shot and killed at a Walmart in Ohio, that he was standing talking on the phone in the pet food section, and some idiot called 911 and lied, saying that there was an active shooter in the store. And the police came in and saw John and thought he was the active shooter and shot and killed him the moment they saw him. John literally had no idea. He's talking on the phone. The next day, I learned that there is a kid laying on a street called Canfield Drive in an area of St. Louis I'd never heard of called Ferguson, who had just been shot and killed by police. And I came to understand, like many people understood, like I knew that police brutality was a problem in the country, but I very quickly came to understand that it was happening in places and with people much more frequently than any of us understood. Because before that, you pretty much only heard stories that happened in New York or LA. It had to be Amadou Diallo. It had to be Rodney King. It had to be a national story, but we didn't have social media for the previous 300 years of American history, and now you were hearing about cases in places that never would have made the news before. And people who local media outlets would have never given a microphone were able to just pull up a live stream app or pull out their phones and film it and post it to Facebook, and immediately those things would be shared. And I came to know many of these families, and I started telling their stories, not for any media outlet, just posting them on Facebook. Because I would click on news links, and they would only tell one side of the story, and it would be what the police said happened. And sometimes they wouldn't even interview the families, not even a quote. And I was like, I want to know what other people have experienced. What did witnesses say? And I just began telling these stories on my Facebook page. And national media outlets began quoting my Facebook page. And then several national media outlets just said, hey, we'd like it if you would just write what you're writing on your Facebook page. Just come write those things for us. And that's literally how I got my first job in journalism. And I left my job at Global Green to become a journalist, not because I wanted to be a journalist. It just allowed me to have a job where I could fight for justice at the same time. I like writing, but I don't even like writing that much. I'm only doing it because I thought it might help us get justice. I'm only doing it as a tool. And as I met these families, I want to confess something to you that I've only recently built up the courage to talk about. I met the family of Mike Brown. I met the family of Eric Garner, of Tamir Rice, who was killed that November of 2014, a 12-year-old boy playing blocks away from his home at the park. And I looked many of these families in the face, and I told them, I said, listen, we will get justice for your family. And when I told them that, there was not a single part of me that thought I was lying. I could not imagine a scenario. I probably told a good 20 families that. I couldn't imagine a scenario where all 20 families would be railroaded. It defied comprehension for me. Because in my mind and in my young life, I was 34 at the time, if I, for most of my adult life, if I was focused and organized and determined and surrounded myself with other people who were focused and organized and determined, for most of my young life, I got what I fought for. But in December of that year, we came quickly to understand that the bottom would fall out of what we were fighting for, and we began getting news bit after news bit that there would be no justice for the family of Eric Garner, no justice for the family of Mike Brown or Tamir Rice or John Crawford. In fact, of the 1,100 people killed by police in 2014, not a single person was held responsible. 0.0%. And even mathematically, statistically, that's ridiculous. And we came to understand that we believed it to be, if you will, a conspiracy. And I was in grad school secretly at the time because people were harassing me everywhere I went, and I didn't want people to know where I was going to school. And I showed up to class in a class called the Introduction to Historiography. And the first picture they showed was this hairy old white man, Leopold von Ranke. And I was in an ugly place. I think I was depressed. I know for sure that I was angry. I was definitely bordering on hating this country. And I found myself just resenting the systems that not only chewed families up and spit them out, but then gave them no form of justice whatsoever. And I looked at this man's face, and I'm in the class, and I'm just thinking, and I know the law students here have had this thought. I'm in the class, and I'm like, this is so irrelevant. Some of your professors are here, so you can't say amen too loud. The dean is a few rows behind you. But I had the thought, I was like, what in the hell does this have to do with anything we're facing in the world? And I went to the registration website, and I tried to drop the class. And I don't know how it is here at University of Connecticut, but where I was in grad school, there are only like 2 or 3 woke professors, and their classes fill up very quickly. And all the good classes were full. And the only thing that was left was like advanced badminton. And I had the thought, who took beginner badminton? Oh, you took it? Oh, I'm sorry, man. Did you take advanced badminton? That's the question. Okay. And so I even had the thought when I saw what was left, was like, I can't take these classes. Like, the class was a required part of my curriculum. I had a thought, I was like, I'm going to take this semester off. And I meant to take the semester off. I think the deadline just passed, and I was stuck with the class. And I went back, and I saw this man, and I didn't want to learn a thing he had to say. But I kid you not, through no ingenuity of my own, the lessons that I learned and what I'm about to teach you, it changed me. And it gave me a tool through which to see what was about to happen. Just 2 months after I enrolled in this class, a young brother named Freddie Gray was killed by police in Baltimore. His spine was severed. When he got to the police station, he was in a coma and never woke up. Just a few months after that, we saw a young sister, and I spoke at Prairie View A&M just recently, and I saw where Sandra Bland had just moved from Chicago to move back to Prairie View, where she went to undergrad, to take a job there for the summer. And she was literally on the Prairie View campus. I didn't understand that till I saw it with my own eyes. And we see her be harassed and arrested and thrown on her head, and then she dies in police custody several days later. The following year, in 2016, we experienced witnessing a death on Facebook Live. As a cafeteria supervisor who we did not know at the time, but was a hero to the children at his school and had a gift, he had a photographic memory, and the staff of the school said he literally knew every single student's name at the school and called them by name. He had been there for a decade. Police there outside of Minneapolis shot and killed him. His fiance put it on Facebook Live. The next day, we witnessed a young brother named Alton Sterling shot and killed. He was the CD man, the man who sold bootleg CDs, which every town has a CD man. And he was actually in a good relationship with the owner of the store. They were close friends, and they saw each other almost as partners. And so I stuck out the class and came to understand who Leopold von Ranke was. He is called by most people the father of the study of history. He developed what were some of the earliest known full-time academic training programs to train historians, and they would end the program with a bachelor's degree in history. And a lot of people, and I actually believe this is true, think there might not be a BA in history if it were not for him. But what he is known for is developing one of the first comprehensive timelines of human history. Now, you have to understand, this is the mid-1800s. There's no Google, there's no Wikipedia, there's no internet, no computers, there are no cell phones. All the traditional tools that we have, like many of you are even too young to remember card catalog systems. There used to be this, for you that are very young, there used to be this thing we would have in libraries with little index cards, and you'd have to thumb through them to find out where your book was located. Like my kids now, that would just seem preposterous to them. You used to have to use that system. And he decided he wanted to create a detailed timeline of human history. And the first thing that he did was he began assembling thousands and thousands of stories from throughout human history of every hero, every villain, every warlord, every president, every artist, every inventor and creator, every person, good, bad, or ugly. He began assembling these stories and putting them in chronological order. And I love this. Every time I see it, I see somebody different. Like right there is Rerun from What's Happening. And what's sad is I spoke at a high school recently, and when I said Rerun from What's Happening, not a single person in the room knew who I was talking about. And many of you may not, and so when you get back later, go to YouTube and type in rerun what's happening dance. You have to put dance in there, and there's a special treat there for you that you can enjoy later. But Von Ranke put all of these stories in chronological order, and he saw something immediately. I'm going to get on the ground here and explain something. He saw something that shook him up. Listen, you all will just have to imagine what I'm doing, okay? And then I'll come back on the stage, but just use your imagination for just a moment, and then I'll come back on stage. Listen, Von Ranke began putting history in a chronological order, and so imagine for a moment that this right here, these are the early humans. This is the passage of time, and imagine this is today. Okay, are you with me? The bottom left-hand corner, these are the early humans, and this is us today. Well, Von Ranke's assumption was that over time, human beings were getting better and better and better and better and better. And it wasn't a weird assumption. His assumption was based in science. Even the theory of evolution, its basic idea is that these humans improved over them, who had improved over them, and over them, and over them, and over them. But when he began putting history in chronological order, moment by moment, person by person, what he found was that the history of human beings actually unfolded much more like this. What he made the mistake of was he thought human beings were getting better and better and better and better, but when he put history in chronological order, what he found was that technology was getting better and better and better. And he realized that he had confused the steady improvement of technology with the steady improvement of humanity. And he said, any way I slice this, if this graph represented 10,000 years or 1,000 or 100 or 10, that our gadgets are always getting better and better and better and better and better. He talked about it. He said the medicine is always getting better, the science, the transportation. Like I am old enough to remember in my life when there was life without cell phones, and in our house we had one phone, and it was on the wall in my mother's kitchen. And there was no such thing as, there definitely was no phone sex. There was no even PG-13. There were no saucy text messages, because here's why. When I would call my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, they had a phone in the kitchen, and that's the phone that I would talk with her on, but her mother also had a phone in her bedroom. Now see, many of you who grew up on cell phones, you don't understand what I'm about to tell you. Like, here are the undergrad students, and I can see you're like, listen, I'm about to tell you something, listen. I would call my girlfriend, and I told my kids this, and they couldn't understand the technology. And I said, listen, I would call mom, but Grand would pick up the phone in the bedroom, and on the low would listen to our conversations. So we knew at any given point that someone might be listening, so our conversations just stayed PG. And I listen, if most of you had, if I had cell phones, I would have been, if most of you had parents who could listen to your conversation, you would be in so much trouble. Technology has changed just over our lifetime. And what Von Ranke found was that humanity unfolds much more like this. When he put it in chronological order, what he found was that sometimes human beings were amazing and sometimes they were terrible. And it didn't unfold in chronological order. If it did, that would mean here are the early humans, and here we are today. The human beings are getting better and better and better, and here we are peak humanity, 2018. Wouldn't that would be an awful thing. I'm sorry to be political, but that would mean Donald Trump is peak humanity. I like to tell jokes, and so, I don't even think Melania Trump thinks Donald Trump is peak humanity. Like, I know, I'm just saying, I'm not even like a defender of Melania. She chose him. Like, this is her choice. FYI, her parents are benefiting from the very system that her husband is advocating to end. Her parents both, this terminology, chain migration, is a horrible thing. It's just the inclusion of people's families. And so they created this term to make it sound nefarious while she a man who is married to an immigrant, divorced from another immigrant, whose immigrant families moved here, is now prosecuting it. Like, this, if we're if we're getting better and better and better and better, how do we explain Donald Trump? And Von Ranke explained it because this is how our technology unfolds, but this is how our humanity unfolds. And what Von Ranke found and what he determined was that human beings would have, and this doesn't represent a day, these peaks sometimes represent eras. He found, and there is a period in South American history where they call it 1,000 years of peace, where South America, it appears, went 1,000 years without a war. He found periods where there was little war, little famine. I don't mean perfection, but he found periods of human history throughout the world where human beings, by and large, respected each other's borders and boundaries, culture. There was very little famine, and then they would crash and work their way up and crash again. And the only thing that was consistent was that humanity was always up and down. It was never this. It was never always getting better. Here's what I know you know. I know that you know that we are not at this peak or that peak. We're somewhere down here. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, he talks, the book is really about your gut, which is just your instinct. And in the book, he unpacks it by saying that your gut is as unique to you as your fingerprint. And he said it's actually amazingly complex. Your gut is actually the accumulation of thousands and thousands of experiences. All of us in the room have been alive now for thousands and thousands of days, and each day is full of moments, and those moments create your instinct. And what he says is, when you have a gut reaction to something, it's extremely accurate, and it's a unique impression of who you are. Here's what I know you know. I know you know in your gut that where we are right now is deeply problematic. But there's something weird that happens in the mind, sometimes just to get through the day. You have to ignore your gut and say, I know it feels like this country is on fire, but I bought tickets to Black Panther, and I'm gonna go see it and enjoy it and just be black and beautiful for the evening, even though I'm fully aware that all around me, we're catching hell. Like, all of us have had to suspend every single day. Multiple times a day, we have to suspend our knowledge that we are down here so that we can smile, so that we can laugh. Now, what I'm about to teach normally would take like 45 minutes, and I'm going to try to do it in 5. Von Ranke's greatest fear was, what will happen if the people are down here and their technology is up here? His prediction in the 1850s is that when there would be moments where the people were horrible, but the technology was exceptional, that awful things would happen. And I think we are living in that prediction of exceptional technology and a lot of disgusting people. While we had a reception, I saw a few moments ago while we were eating our snacks, the governor of Missouri was arrested because he chained a woman up and took nude photos of her and then tried to blackmail her because she's not his wife. And I'm talking about the governor of Missouri. He's in jail right now, tonight. He was elected. See, yeah, I see your eyes, because it's like, oh my God, did he say he chained a woman up and took pictures of her? He was having an affair and took a woman into his basement. And she thought one thing was happening, and then she realized when he blindfolded her and chained her up, he started taking photos. And then after he did it, he then told her, if you ever tell anyone what we've been doing, I just want you to know I have these. So he's in jail. And he was seen, a grand jury indicted him this afternoon in St. Louis, and he was arrested. We are not up here. I don't think we're at the lowest. Listen, I'm the guy they bring in to tell you the truth. I think we are on one of the downward trajectories on our way down. I don't think we've hit the bottom. Let me push it a little bit. If we're getting better and better and better and better, how do we explain this? This is a diagram from the Transatlantic slave trade. If you go to the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C., you can see this actual version of it. It's there. This is not an artist's rendering. This was created by an entrepreneur who wanted to understand exactly how many human beings can I fit onto this ship. Here's what I want you to understand. If this diagram represents all of human history, early humans till today, then this right here, this took place about right here. In the scheme of human history, this was yesterday. A woman voted in the 2016 election whose father had been enslaved. If we're getting better and better and better, how do we explain the wounds on this man's back? If this is how humanity works, how do we explain these men? I live in Brooklyn, and in New York, we have the largest community of survivors of the Holocaust of any city in America. And if we're getting better and better and better, how do we explain this? Because in the scheme of human history, this took place like right here at the end of the final bar. People who experienced it still walk among us. If we're getting, this is a pile of shoes at a former concentration camp where all of the bodies perished, but their shoes are still there. If we're getting better and better and better, how do we explain Rwandan Genocide? This happened when I was in middle school. This is at a Rwandan Genocide museum. To this very day, they find skulls and fragments of skulls all around Rwanda, and they are sacred because for entire cities, that's all that was left. So we understand that this is how technology works, but it's not how humanity works. This is how humanity works, and we are in a dip, a drop. I know we're in a drop because last year, 102 fully unarmed black men, women, and children were killed by American police. We took out of that number, there was a man who was killed by police who had a serving spoon. We took him out. There was a man in Miami who was killed with a house broom. We took him out. There were multiple people who had replica guns and BB guns. We took them out. These 102 people were fully unarmed. Does anyone know who this is? He's the 25th president. I was at a middle school and somebody yelled out, Jimmy Carter. And I said, oh man. No, you might not know who it is, but it's definitely not Jimmy Carter. He's the 25th president. Who? No, it's not Rutherford B. Hayes. Come on, law students and graduates, you talented 10th of America. Who is this? It's not Harding. Not Fillmore. Who said McKinley? Who said that? The photographer who, thank you. Someone in the back also, okay. Thank you, sir. You didn't Google it, did you? It's William McKinley, and he's not widely known. He died in office, and that's why it's very difficult to remember. You would have to go back, this is in 1902. You would have to go back to the last year he was president to find a year where 102 or more African Americans were lynched. What is a lynching? It's when someone serves as judge, jury, and executioner. Guilt or innocence does not matter. And last year, 102 African Americans who never faced a jury of their peers, not African American, unarmed, black men, women, and children, were killed by Americans. These are legal lynchings. And the last year that many people were lynched in America, he was president. You live in the era, you understand that when Dylann Roof walked into the Charleston church, that was the deadliest hate crime against African Americans in 85 years? You live in that time. And I have to remind you that you live in that time because it's hard to know the time you live in when you live in it. It's hard to know context when you're just in it. Someone, are you trying to go somewhere? Someone had Google Maps up. Were the directions correct? All right. I am a good roaster, but I will stop. If we're getting better and better and better, how do we explain this? This is the United States state and federal prison population. In the bottom left-hand corner that says 1925, but we could go back hundreds and hundreds of years. We could go back to the 1600s, and for a good 300 years in America, our prison population stayed below 200,000. And then right along 1974, this is why everyone in the room should read The New Jim Crow. It's why everybody in the room should watch the documentary 13th, because both the book and the documentary explains something happened here. Nixon's director of policy openly admits, and they quote him in both the book and the documentary, that he and the team decided, how can we criminalize blackness without actually saying that's what we're doing? So they decided they would do it in two ways. They said the first thing they will do is find laws that already exist that we will only apply in black communities. And the second thing that we will do is create new laws, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, that we will apply almost exclusively in black communities. And we'll give it a name: the war on drugs. It was not a war on drugs. It was a war on people. And it was not a war on all people. It was a war on very particular people. When you get a chance, Google this: black-white drug disparity, Washington Post. And the top link will be a story that quotes an amazing study. And the study took place from 1980 to 2010. And it studied drug use, the sale of drugs, between white people and black people. And what it found between 1980 and 2010 was that white people and black people used drugs at about the same rate. But what shocked people, that wasn't so shocking, was that white people sold drugs at a slightly higher rate. It's like, oh, really? But that African Americans were prosecuted 850% more, thereby creating the stereotype of a drug dealer. And I've done this in workshops. I said, in 10 words, describe for me what a drug dealer looks like. And it doesn't matter if it's a black audience or white audience. People write and describe a young black man in so many words, when in reality the study found that the average American drug dealer is a stinky white man. I'm just being real. A middle-aged hippie is the average American drug dealer. who lives his whole life rarely being charged with anything. And if we're getting better and better and better, how do we explain this? Or how do we explain this? This is the United States rate of imprisonment. We have the highest rate of imprisonment in the world. And I'll highlight just quickly who's second. I want to highlight that it's Rwanda in particular, not because it's a country in Africa and Africa is horrible. Africa is wonderful. Rwanda is number 2 because they just got out of genocide. The United States has a higher rate of imprisonment than the country that narrowly escaped genocide. That's disturbing. We currently have a higher rate of imprisonment than South Africa did during apartheid right now. We explain all of this because this is how technology works, but it's not how humanity works. We are in a dip right now. It's my closing thoughts as we transition to the panel. A lot of us blame, this will be the nicest thing you'll hear me say about Donald Trump tonight. It's hard. A lot of people blame this dip on him. It's a significant misunderstanding of how we got here. Donald Trump was elected because we were already there. He is a symptom of the dip we already found ourselves in. To be clear, Democrats were in charge for 60% of this. Okay, that's like, Trump didn't do that, okay? He didn't help it, but he didn't cause it. See, I remember when he announced his campaign off of a criticism of Latino immigrants being rapists and murderers, and I thought, this is going to be bad. And he had 17 opponents who stepped back as a strategy and thought, we will let him crash and burn because it's only a matter of time until he ruins himself. And I actually understand that as political strategy. Many people advised Hillary's campaign to do the same thing. And it didn't work. And then a few months later, he announced a ban. At first, his ban was on all Muslims entering the country. And then he tweeted this meme about black criminality, and it had a statistic saying that 90% of white people are killed by black people. And it was a diagram, and he refused to delete it, when in reality that 90% of the people from every race are killed by people from that race. It's between 88 and 92% for every race. Latinos are killed by Latinos, black folk are killed by black folk, whites are killed by whites, normally by somebody you know. But he refused to delete it. And I had the thought, wow, they're just going to let him do this. And then he was in a discussion, and they asked him a question about a criticism that John McCain had. And he said he didn't respect John McCain because he didn't like soldiers who got caught as prisoners of war. And I thought, oh, you can diss Muslims and black folk and Latinos in this country, but you can't diss an old white war veteran. He's gone. A few days later, he was in a debate, and Megyn Kelly asked him a mildly tough question. The following day, someone asked him about the question, and he blamed the toughness of her question on her being on her period. And I thought, you can't say that. It's dumb to believe it. It's outrageous to say it. And I thought, you can diss black folk and Latinos and Muslims and still get the Republican nomination, but you can't diss a blue-haired, blonde-haired, white woman from Fox News who's very popular and still get the Republican nomination. That was my thought. He's crossed the line even for the people who are voting for him. And when he saw the line wasn't crossed, let me tell you what Trump knew before most of us knew. Trump then said, after that, I could go out in front of my house, I live in New York. He lives off of Fifth Avenue. I could go out on Fifth Avenue and shoot and kill someone, and my people would stick with me. Can we pause there for a moment? That is an outrageous thought and a violent, horrible thing to say. Here's what he knew. He already knew we were here. And he understood that when you are in the dip, some rules don't apply. 15 women came out and said he had sexually assaulted them in one way or another. And even Republicans began to say, like, this is too much. And then a tape came out of him explicitly confessing that he did the thing that the 15 women said he did, and then a month later he got elected president. He got elected president because we're already in the dip. Here's where it's hopeful. Every dip this country has ever found itself in, we also always found ourselves out of it. That's the good news. Here's what I'm most concerned about. Dips can sometimes last for a few years. Sometimes they can last for a few decades. And in the period like of the transatlantic slave trade, sometimes dips can last for hundreds of years. Dips are easy to get into and tremendously difficult to get out of. Most dips that we found ourselves in, it took war and death and violent confrontation to get out of. And that's not what I'm predicting. I'm just saying it takes tremendous effort. And it's my last slide. I designed this slide. Somebody designed this slide for me, so the quality goes way down for the slide that I designed. And everywhere I speak, somebody says, hey, let me fix, I'm a graphic designer, let me fix it. But then I would not be able to tell the joke that I just told. So I only leave this slide up to set myself up for the joke that I just told. I want you to be able to predict when a dip is coming, okay? This blue line on the left represents the status quo. Status quo can be good or bad. It's just the way things are. And in American history, when someone introduces an innovation that not only disturbs the status quo, but disturbs the primary people who prefer the status quo, there's always a dip. We could also call that a backlash. I'll tell you 3 examples. One is a long period of slavery in America. Then we had the Civil War, which we forget so easily was the deadliest war for Americans in the history of wars. Over 1 million people died, nearly 1 million people lost limbs. And after that, we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the Emancipation Proclamation. Our nation introduced an innovation, and it disturbed the primary people in power. Well, guess what happened afterwards? The explosion of the KKK and lynching throughout this country. The backlash was the KKK and lynching. We had 100 years, look at this long blue line again. We had 100 years of what we call Jim Crow, which was the new status quo after the end of slavery, where Americans were separate and unequal, and there was, again, a period of lynching and the like. And then toward the end of this line, we have the civil rights movement. We have the Montgomery bus boycott. We have Brown versus the Board of Education. We have the March on Washington, and then a few things pass that are game changers. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act greatly disturbed the primary people in power, because for the first time, it was now enforceable that all black folk would get the right to vote no matter what you thought about them. That what you thought didn't matter. No poll test, no poll tax, none of that. And there was a backlash. That backlash is mass incarceration. The system of mass incarceration was created as a response to the civil rights movement. That's what the new Jim Crow, that's what 13th, that's what those things are about. is why was it created when it was created? Here's the last one, and everyone in the room experienced it. We have 43 of these. Anybody want to guess what we had 43 of? Not these men, no, not them. We had 43 presidents, 43 white presidents, even more specific, white male presidents. That, you know, America's presidents, they were white and they were men. And we said, hey, let's mix it up a little bit. Let's try something different. And not only did we say, let's try something different, we decided to elect, I mean this as a compliment, the most peculiar, unique black man in America. When I first heard about, it sounds familiar now, but it did not originally sound so familiar. When I first heard about Barack Hussein Obama, it was in 2003, and I asked a buddy of mine, I said, where's he from? You know, names sometimes signify birth or culture. And I said, where is he from? And I had the thought that, you know, like the name sounded Islamic, and I had friends named Barack, and I had friends named Hussein. They were all Muslims. And he said, well, he's from the south side of Chicago. I said, okay. And, you know, the Nation of Islam is in Chicago. And I thought, man, maybe he converted to Islam through the nation or something like that. And they said, no. They said, well, he's not really from the south side of Chicago. He's actually from Hawaii. And I said, that is not helping me at all. Because I literally had never heard of any black folk from Hawaii. They said, well, okay. His father was an African scholar from Kenya, and his mother was a white hippie from Kansas who gave birth to him in Hawaii, but he actually lived a big chunk of his childhood in Indonesia. And I said, what? Like literally, you could not make that story up. And we said, let's make him president. Like no one has that historical narrative. It's a uniquely American story. And we elected him president, breaking the line of 43 white men, and a lot of people, particularly one group of people, were very irritated by it. One particular man made a well-known reality TV star, consistently made his frustration known. And he began saying, Donald Trump said, I don't believe he's an American. I am paying to send private investigators to Hawaii to prove it. A little history and a little citizenship here. If you are an American citizen and you give birth to a child in any other country, your child is an American citizen. No one ever disputed that his mother was Ann Dunham. And the weird thing is she literally never stepped foot in Africa a day in her life. But had she given birth to him in Kenya, have you seen a picture of the picture of Obama at the beach with his white grandfather? You see it, you're like, oh my God, they look so much alike. Of course that's his mother. In essence, the theory behind the birther movement was that Ann Dunham in the early 60s hatched a plot to give birth to the man who would one day become king. She would hide his Islamic origins and his Kenyan citizenship. Literally, like it's a ridiculous, he would always be an American no matter, because it was never about citizenship, it was about blackness. They weren't disturbed by his birth, they were disturbed by his blackness. John McCain was not born in the United States. Nobody's bothered by that. Ted Cruz was not born in the United States. Who cares? He's white passing, by the way. That man's Latino, whether he wants to own it or not. That's just a whole nother, there's a thing called white passing, and he's Latino. Your father's from Cuba, and you're a Latino, but nobody cares because we don't see him in that way. We don't see him as a man of color. And so, for nearly 8 straight years, there was a backlash. And the Southern Poverty Law Center released a study yesterday saying that last year was the worst year for hate crimes in America in most of our lifetime. And they had increased year upon year upon year because we're here. We are here. This is Charlottesville. This is Parkland, Florida. You know we're here when a man will kick a hotel window out in Las Vegas and shoot 541 people. And we just keep on going because we're here. Did you see the kids who went to the Florida Legislature? Listen, hold on. The Florida Legislature did not vote against an assault weapons ban. That's not what happened. They voted against even talking about it. It wasn't a vote against a ban. They voted against the discussion. And if you saw the video of the kids broke out in tears of pain because we're here. Did you see the video of one of them asking Marco Rubio? Yeah. It's shameful to watch. We're here. And here is what I know. That we will stay here until we all together fight our way out of it. And I hope as you can write your questions and pass them down, many of the questions that I hope will be, well, how do we get out of there? And we'll linger there. Because I'm not convinced that we're doing what it takes to get out of where we find ourselves. All right? Did this make sense? Did you learn a little something? Do you understand the context of where we are right now? We're in a dip. We've been here before. It's a painful place where stuff is accepted that shouldn't be. All right? Thank you so much.
Now, I promised you that he would speak truth to power. So, do you believe that to be the case? So, if you would please pass your questions to the aisles, I believe the outer aisles. Some of the team is coming to pick them up. I cannot promise you that all of the questions will be answered because simply I don't believe that we plan to be here until tomorrow. Though we have witnessed some filibustering in our Congress within the last couple of days, I'm not sure that CNN is recording this or C-SPAN, so we will try our best to consolidate the questions. But what I would like to do, and just remind you of the illustrious panel, and first, before I even get there, is just to thank Shaun for taking us to school and helping us to really think about, in its appropriate context, many of the things that we have been facing in our society today. So thank you so much for that really critical look. And I don't think we should take for granted the ability to be able to recall and recount and to weave together all of those different moments in history. So we're really grateful for that opportunity. But I want to remind you of the incredible panelists that we have here with us. And I had actually put together, I had to do my homework because I was coming to the law school, and I wanted to make sure that I was appropriately prepared. And so I have all of these wonderful questions, but I'm going to wait for the ones that you have. I do first want to say that one of the things, to Shaun's point, that that I wrote down actually as we were in the midst of the discussion is, so what are we going to do? What can we do to effectively get out of that dip? So I'd ask you to think about that, because one of the things that I would hope that we do this evening before we depart is to really think about some things that we can do, some things that might be positive to allow us to begin to move out of that dip. But I'd like to actually start with, while we're waiting for the collected questions, you know, there are moments when we can think about all the challenges that are ahead of us, and it can be extremely daunting and discouraging and frustrating. And so I'm grateful that we do have a psychologist on our panel, because some of us may need some help. Psychiatrist, yeah. So we need some help. So one of the questions actually that I have for you, Dr. Jordan, Dr. Ayana Jordan, who is, I have your bio in here too, and I think we said it earlier, but I would like to really give folks an idea of who each of you are. We have with us, I should say first, since I'm going to ask her a question, Dr. Ayana Jordan, who is a MD, who's a practicing psychiatrist therapist in New Haven. She graduated from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Yeshiva University, and has been in practice since then. She completed a residency at Yale and also practices at Yale School of Medicine. Now wait, I just want you to know this. In addition to English, I thought this was pretty incredible. Now I don't know that you necessarily speak all these languages, but I'm going to tell it as if you do. Your practice, I mean, you know, they don't really know, and they won't ask you. Dr. Jordan's practice, you don't know that this is what it says about you on the internet? Well, anyway, so what had happened was, in your practice, you apparently support French, Spanish, Arabic, Korean, Polish, Italian, German, and Russian. So, well, a little bit of everybody. She said no. We're going to find out. We're going to do a fact checker. You know, isn't it? Who's on that television show? We need a fact checker. But in any case, the question that I have for you, just to start off, and then I'll introduce our other panelists as we move forward. We talk a lot, or we hear a lot of talk about, and it's very easy to really get caught in the context of the trauma that has been caused clearly throughout the lives, I think, of underrepresented people in this country, but certainly as we talk about the really clear and utter racism that we've witnessed as of late, and its significant impact, in particular, on the lives of Black people. Can you talk a little bit about that? There's lots of research around it, but if you could give us a little bit of insight as we try to move ourselves out of the dip.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Is this on?
Doesn't sound like it.
Sorry, Yukon Law. I'm not trying to come up here and mess up your stuff. I am going to answer that question, but I am so full right now, and I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and so I just need to go to church for a second, y'all, because I am full right now, and this brother spoke truth to power, so I'm thankful for that. So bear with me, because the Spirit is in me, and I just want to sing This Little Light of Mine. Join me, because I don't want to sing it alone, and y'all don't want to hear me. But all the time, God is good, and God is good. All the time. Amen, people. All right. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Amen. Thank you for that. Amen. So, a couple of things. Number one, Black people, stand up in this building today, y'all. Stand up. Black people, stand up. Woo! Amen. So I just have to say, happy Black History Month, right? Happy Black Excellence Month. I am often in white spaces at Yale and New Haven, go and talk across this great nation and often surrounded by white people. And so when I am in a room with this many Black folk talking about how we can fight against a racist system and still thrive, how we can be in a dip and continue to think about solutions, I am full. So I am grateful for that. In Wakanda, this would not be a rare.
If you haven't seen Black Panther, you really should.
Listen, I know that I'm in the U.S. I went to Wakanda last week. I'm going to Wakanda again on Sunday, but until the U.S. is filled with Wakandans, y'all, I got to continue to try to strive to make the U.S. like Wakanda. So much to say. I had some prepared notes, but it is what it is. We'll listen to the questions. But I do want to say that I went to the best historically Black college and university, Hampton University. Woo-woo! Hamptonians out there. I had a chance to train at some of the best institutions really in this country. Albert Einstein College of Medicine, went on to train at Yale in psychiatry, stayed on and did addiction fellowship, have a PhD in immunopathology, have a medical degree. But still, our current system is failing us, okay? And when I say us, I mean specifically the healthcare system in this country is really failing all people when it comes to dealing with addiction, specifically drug and alcohol use, but definitely Black people. And that's the type of research that I do. That's the population that I work with. I teach and see patients in a community mental health center. So I oftentimes am working with people of color and get so frustrated by the racist system in which I have to work and exist, and often think about ways in which I can help people live better lives and live in recovery in a failing system. So just so you understand my worldview, the current system in which I function, I do not believe is working. I know it's failing. Similar to what Shaun King said earlier. Black and white people do abuse substances at the same rates. Actually, we have more current data to support Black people actually use alcohol at lower rates. Nicotine and other substances are at the same rates. However, not only do we not engage in treatment, we as Black people don't engage in substance abuse treatment at the same rates. Even if we do happen to engage in care, usually through the, I call it the legal, the criminal system, not the justice system, because I feel like there's no justice in the system. Oftentimes, people of color will come to me as an addiction psychiatrist through the legal system and still not complete treatment because of things like physician disrespect, which is a kind of personally mediated racism, when they are not given the same options as their white counterparts, okay? When evidence-based treatments are not even presented to them because of how they look, all right? We'll have a cocaine use disorder, we'll have an opioid use disorder, but will not even be offered the same treatment that are out there because of how they look. Or, let's say all things being equal, they happen to, and this is both for Black physicians and white physicians, right? We're all socialized in this racist system. Let's say they happen to come into care even though we know that they don't engage care at the same time. Let's say that they happen to come across a woke person that offers them treatment. They're less likely to stay engaged in recovery because there's no community that adequately addresses the trauma and daily racism that Black people often face, all right? So what I think needs to happen when we're dealing with the current system is that we have to begin to create solutions that don't rely on kind of historic practices. And one of the things that I've been able to do is actually partner with Black churches and faith communities to actually provide treatment in the Black church setting itself in order to really be able to provide culturally informed, kind of spiritual, but also physical interventions that work for our population. So that's one thing. We're also able to be very honest and truthful about what is happening. So really quickly, and then I'll stop talking for the sake of time. But what makes me so angry right now is this whole opioid epidemic. Everybody's talking about the opioid epidemic. Okay. This is not the first time we've had an opioid epidemic in this country, right? The 60s and the 70s. Heroin was rampant in this country, right? But what happened, because it was really in communities of color, mostly Black, the agent at that time is heroin, and don't get it twisted, all right? The narrative in the media right now is that how do white people become addicted to opioids? They're getting it from their doctor and this and that. We know recently, this was in the 2017 journal, Addictive Research Behaviors, we know more people now are starting opioids as heroin, not as prescription pills, all right? The same way that Blacks were becoming addicted in the 60s and 70s, but now, because it's mainly dealing with white people, now we understand it as a brain disease, as a treatment, as a disease that needs treatment as opposed to, right, criminalization, right? Yes, it's true that white people are using more opioids. However, the increase in the amount of that people are using altogether are going up for every single race. And actually, in some states, Black people are dying at greater heights than white people. But we don't hear about that, right? We just hear about the white opioid epidemic. So part of it, too, is just educating so people understand this is not new, all right? The way in which Black people have been treated in this country, we have history to support this, but we have to think about it in a different way, because the way in which we are dealing with the populations is very different. It's unequitable, and I don't think that we can rely on a racist system in order to address our communities, because it won't ever happen. So we're going to rely on partnerships between people like you and these amazing budding lawyers that are coming, so that we can figure out how we can start collaborations that make sense for communities of color. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jordan. As we talk tonight about the destruction of the Black body, I would encourage you to think about body in two ways, both the physical but also as the broader community, a body of individuals, a body of people. And so with that, I'd like to move to Dr. DeVeaux. Dr. DeVeaux is a lecturer at Nassau Community College. That's where I'm from, Long Island, represent. Anybody from Long Island? Okay. And then the sad thing is that when I first met him, I was like, oh, you're from near my hometown. And he was like, I don't know anything about that. I'm from Harlem. I was like, oh. Anyway, I'm proud to be from Long Island. I just want to say I'm not trying to represent like I'm from Harlem, but I appreciate Harlem World. Anyway, he is the co-founder and executive director of Citizens Against Recidivism, directs Citizens Muslim Reentry Initiative, and is a certified anger management facilitator. Dr. DeVeaux is also the founder and principal at DeVeaux Association, a consulting firm that provides evaluation, monitoring, and other services for nonprofits. As we think about today's conversation, Dr. DeVeaux has over 3 decades of experience working with men and women impacted by the criminal justice system. His research interests includes the hyper-incarceration impact on the African American community, Black male incarceration, community reintegration of Black male incarcerates, incarceration policy, and class and racial inequity. And so my first question for you, and please feel free to elaborate and sort of, I'm sure you have copious notes, so I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to respond. But can you talk to us a little bit about the impact of incarceration, in particular as we think about not only the physical body, but also the body, the community, and what the impacts are on the Black community in particular of incarceration and our maybe failed efforts to work to ensure that recidivism doesn't occur, but also for reentry. Can you talk a little bit to that?
So good evening. My mic works. I got that Barry White voice as well, you know what I'm saying? But I want to first thank Shaun for starting us off. And as he was speaking, one of the things that I was attempting not to do was to cry. And I was trying to hold back because I felt the people that were being talked about, because it is a part of our experience. And to not feel would be a denial of my own humanity. And I think that because these stories are now readily viewable via social media, to some extent we have become insensitive to this reality. And it was important for Shaun to call the names, because often when we hear the stories, we don't hear the names and we forget that we are talking about people. And so I want to thank you for that. With respect to the impact that incarceration has on the Black community, it's like, where do you start? And I think that in order to understand current context, as Shaun did, we also have to remember, how did we get here? And one of the things that I was thinking about was a case, and I'm sure the law students will know that there was a case in the United States Supreme Court where it said that the Black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect. And that was a case. But it also described a mindset, how Black people in this particular country were conceptualized. And then there was, prior to that, some statement wherein Black people were counted as 2/3 of a person. And so for me, you know, thinking of all these things, thinking of how we got to this point, it sort of sets the stage that since being here, we have been denied the acknowledgement of our humanity, of being conceptualized and thought of as human beings. And since being here, we have been fighting, struggling just to be thought of as such. When you think of our system of incarceration, particularly how it has affected Black people, you have to think, for me, it begins with the foundation of the system, which begins with the 13th Amendment. That slavery shall be abolished except for those people that have been convicted of a crime. Well, that says something about those people that are going through the system, how they are conceptualized, and you have to relate the concept of slave to those that are in the system. And then Shaun was talking about history, or his story. If you understand it as his story, then you understand that this is a perspective that is generally told from the vantage point of the victor. When the victor tells the story, you got his story. And if we understand criminology as told from the perspective of the people that are in positions of power, it too is telling us a story about controlling those that have been thought of as dangerous people. And link that with the 13th Amendment, history told from the perspective of the victors, criminology as being a story or even a study of how oppressors seek to maintain basically control over people of color, and understand what the experience is of living as a Black person in this country. Now you're going to jail. And then understand how there is a psychological effect that people, that happens to people in terms of, during that incarceration experience. For example, one of the things I say about prison, particularly as it relates to men, it perpetuates adolescence, wherein they are not only emasculated, but infantized, wherein one asks for everything, to go to the bathroom, when to stand up, when to eat, when to walk, when to talk. Not to mention the experience of being in solitary confinement, I don't say the trauma, but the whole experience in itself is traumatizing, but to be in a sensory deprived place and the impact that that has on one's psyche. And this would lend, more to the conversation that the good doctor was speaking of before. And then thinking of how the experience of incarceration, what it does to families in terms of the disruption of families, the disruption of connections, disruption of for men being sons, being fathers, being brothers, being a part of the community. And then you add on to that the notions of, not the notion, but disenfranchisement, how the community is rendered powerless because of the inability to participate in the governance of one's own affairs. And then being counted as a member of another community, wherein federal dollars generally go to communities based on their population, the size of the population. And so while one is in prison, you are counted as being in the county where the prison is. And so that county, which is generally in New York State in particular, populated by mostly white folks, those folks are inheriting, or another way, benefiting from your being in prison to the detriment of your own community. And then, while in prison, people are ill-prepared to return to the communities in terms of minimal, if any, when we do consider notions of rehabilitation, prepared with skills, levels of education, all this factors into how incarceration has the least effect upon the black community. But one needs to also think of incarceration as a form of genocide. That was one of the notes, but I don't want to pull up my little laptop and pull that article out. But among the things that a researcher did, and I have a name, I just don't want to pull it up, was she compared, and there's an international body that talks about genocide, and they have a number of points. And she juxtaposed those points in terms of what was happening to the black community, particularly the experience of black people with respect to prison. Prison is genocidal in its nature in terms of the extent to which it minimizes conjugal relationships, the extent to which it perpetuates or even, we'll just say death, because genocide is death. And so, very briefly, those are just some of the ways that incarceration has an impact on the black community. And of course, what else you wanted to say? I mean, there's more. But we want to give, Dr. Robyn a little shot, you know what I'm saying? So I don't want to hog the mic, because you get hungry when you got the mic in your hand, you know what I'm saying? So I'm resisting the temptation, but.
Well, I appreciate that, I appreciate that. You can hold on to that.
I can hold on to the mic, yeah. I'm trying to get the mic up.
Dr. Robyn Brown-Manning is a full-time visiting lecturer at the Silberman School of Social Work. She is an accomplished social work educator, practitioner, and facilitator who spent her career in several settings working to empower people and communities. Her academic work is concentrated around African American families, particularly women and mothers. Her dissertation explores the experiences of African American mothers raising sons. through extensive ethnographic and qualitative research. It highlights the ways they navigate parenthood and care within the yoke of systemic discrimination against young Black men. Dr. Brown-Manning, I'd like you to reflect in my organization of questions up here. If you would, the third pillar that we're addressing this evening around the destruction of the Black body focuses on education. And it's often widely held that education is the key to mobility within America. So as you reflect upon the educational system in the United States, and we think about the segregation, the integration, and the resegregation of our communities, and the impact and influence that that has had on Black bodies. And also, as we connect to the comment about incarceration, I would share some data around Black students and the significant overrepresentation amongst those who are suspended or expelled, and what we have come to know as the school-to-prison pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about the impact or influence of the education system on the family and the Black community in particular?
Well, first of all, I want to greet you in the name of my ancestors, and I want to invoke their energy here, specifically my grandmothers, Annie Mae Orange and Ada Smith, my mentor from Camp Minnesink, Gladys V. Thorne, and my dad. This is a night of inspiration. And so I want to, before I address the question, share with you something that I heard Dr. Naeem Akbar say many, many years ago, which has stayed with me. So Shaun, your refrain was, how do we explain this? How do we explain this? And I want to know, how do we explain this? Naeem Akbar said that anybody who has studied basic chemistry knows that if you put an item in a foreign substance or a foreign culture, it dies. Every seventh grade kid knows that. And he said, so that when you look at what the media tries to portray as being the norm in Black communities, the rapists, the murderers, the thieves, the drug users, et cetera, he said, that's to be expected, having been transferred from their homeland, our homeland, on the continent of Africa, into this, that's a normal outcome. He says we're studying the wrong thing. Because what we should be looking at is how are all of you sitting here as students in a law school? How are we sitting up here with all these letters after our names? He reminds us that we are standing on the shoulders of grandmothers who couldn't spell the name college, but kicked the doors in and said, let them in. There is something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. And I think part of what the educational system has done, particularly since it became integrated, is it has taken away from us the understanding that there's something inside so strong, and that we have spent a lot of our energy in the past 50, 60 years trying to utilize tools and instruments and theories of the colonizer to get out of whatever this is we're in. The reality is, if we give ourselves permission, we know the answers. We've been there. We've done this before. We've been with the Trumps before. We've landed on these shores. We've been terrorized consistently. And yet we sit here. And yes, still we rise. I'm reading a book right now called Revolutionary Mothering. And it's a series of essays. And one of the authors, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, talks about the audacity, what she calls it, queer mothering. And she, if this is a word, degenderizes. She takes away gender from the term mothering and talks about motherful versus fatherless. That we tend to talk in our communities about single fathers, fatherless, etc. And she talks about the fact that that comes out of a white male patriarchy. If we look back at some of our roots in Africa, it wasn't always that male who was the head of the home. It was women. There are many dominant women's groups, if you will, in various countries and various cultures on the continent. But what she talks about is connected to what Naeem Akbar said. How do you explain that in spite of all the crap that we have faced consistently, that black mothers and fathers still have the audacity to bring forth black children into this world, knowing that this is a world that is not ready to receive them, that is not ready to value them, that does not recognize them, that we still have the audacity to kick down the doors and say, let them in. There's something inside so strong. When we look at the educational system, to your question, and how it impacts, I think one of the things that we have to, and this is, again, getting out of the messages that we got in the colonized system that we've lived in. We talk about these things are not working, they're doing a disservice to our communities. Well, you're damn right they're doing a disservice to our communities. That's what they were set up to do. So these systems are working perfectly. And I know as a social work educator, that's a hard thing to pass on to my students who come in complaining, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. No, the educational system is working perfectly. It's designed to keep you out. It's designed to keep us here, because Lord knows what would happen to capitalism if we all suddenly achieved, right? Capitalism doesn't work without worker bees. I'm looking at the educational system. I'm so proud of the young people who are advocating for the gun, for the laws to be changed. I'm so proud of how they've risen up. And while I'm proud for them on this end, the other side of me says, to my knowledge, there has not been a black kid who has shot up a school in the United States. But it's our schools that have the metal detectors in them. Please explain that to me. Please explain that to me. We talk about mental health. I read an article, I forget the author's name, but he said what we're missing is we've got some hurting young white boys out there, and nobody's paying attention to them because they're too busy criminalizing our boys. Okay. So the expulsion rate, I think I've got the numbers here somewhere. Well, we don't care. We know they're high, okay? What's shocking for me is we talk about the school-to-prison pipeline. What we're not looking at is the preschool-to-prison pipeline, because the expulsion from preschool is something like 50–60%. These are our babies that are being kicked out of school before they even get into kindergarten. We know that they look at the third grade reading levels to make account for, how many beds do we need to get ready for, for them to occupy within our prison systems. We're talking a lot about boys, but we've seen the girls being handcuffed to chairs in schools, being thrown to floors in schools. So they've just about exhausted the stuff with our boys. Now they're coming after the girls. The fastest growing population, I believe, in the prison system is black women. So for me, it's very hard to talk specifically. I can talk a little bit later about how this intersectionality, I guess, the interconnection of all of these systems is showing up in the undergraduate and graduate level in schools. Because there's something that's happening in my classrooms, not just in terms of academics, students are brilliant, but in terms of how they show up in the classroom, particularly in integrated classroom settings, how they're not letting their brilliance come forth, how they're silencing themselves, how they're sitting on the rage. And what that does, it has a trickle out of it. Those of you who are professors of color, I find myself mothering all the time. I sometimes feel like I've got 20 breasts and 20 kids, one on each nipple. You know. And so we haven't even talked about what is the toll on those of us who were charged with ushering these children into their students into their professional lives. So I don't know if that speaks to it directly, but Shaun said that's good, so.
So I want you all to know that I have done my best, because I'm told that I can read 3 questions, to consolidate the 25 questions that I have into 3 buckets. So I just need you all to know that your questions are going to be somewhat complex and will be multi-part, because that's the only way I can make it happen. Okay, so we're ready, right? Y'all ready? Okay. So the first question is going to address how we, excuse me, how we work together across the diaspora, across our different intersectionalities, across culture, state, city boundaries, to address how we can ensure our survival and recover from the anger and depression that we are experiencing in order to move forward. Yeah, I told you I'm working it out. To not hate America today. There you go. First question. And don't ask me to repeat it, because I do the best you can. I'm trying.
Hey, let me chime in real quick. I think all of first thank the entire panel just for their brilliant remarks and for your gracious kindness toward me. But I think what I'm about to say was reflected in something that each of us said, is that so much of what we've experienced, not just over the past few years, but even throughout generations, so much of what we do is reactionary, okay? And we must be reactionary, because we experience crisis after crisis, emergency after emergency, death after death, murder after murder. But it puts us in this position where it's particularly difficult to properly organize the way we need to organize to proactively address problems that I think were reflected in all of these comments, problems that are enormously complex. So because we are going from protest to protest, which is a reactionary protest, to trauma and harm that's caused, it really lowers the quality and nuance of our organization. And I say that's bad, but here's what's beautiful on the other side. With all of the problems that we're experiencing in our country, I don't think our worst problems have met our best solutions. And there are 4 things that you need to make change happen on these complex problems of mass incarceration, of education, of public health, all of these problems of gun violence in our neighborhood. All these problems are enormously complex, and I teach a workshop on how to make change, and there are 4 things that I say you need. You need people, and they can be intersectional, they can be intergenerational, and they should be, but you need people and they need to be energized. That's the first thing. Because change is hard, change is difficult, and you have to approach whatever you're about to fight, you have to approach it with a serious level of energy. So you need people and they need to be energized. You need people and they need to be organized. An example is, in this room, there are people, and we're a relatively motivated, energized group of people, but we're not really organized. Someone probably has your email address, you got a ticket, and that's probably the extent of our organization, is names and email addresses. That's not even step 1 in organizing people. I don't know who you are. I don't know your skills, your gifts, or your talents. I wouldn't even know exactly what to ask you as an individual or you as an individual, because I don't even know what your gifts are. That assessment has not happened. So often we get people and they're energized and we're like, we're about to make change happen. But our people are rarely organized as much as we need to be. And then the final 2 things are, you need energized people and organized people. And this is what gets to the heart of your question, is we need a comprehensive plan that will bring the success that we aim to have. And most of us are not operating from a plan, we're operating from our pain. We're operating out of the trauma in response to it. It's what we're seeing in Florida, it's what we're seeing in other places, it's what we experience in our communities every single day. We're responding to the pain and trying to survive through it, but we're not operating from a comprehensive plan, and consequently, very little changes. Things appear as if they will always be this way because we're not operating from a plan that will succeed. And here's the last thing. And on the issues that matter most, particularly as we fight against things like mass incarceration, you need organized people, energized people, you need a plan, and it takes a lot of money. And those of us who are fighting for change in society are woefully underfunded. And I want to tell you, and I bet you know who they are, there's one particular group in this country that gets all 4 of those things moving at the same time. And when you get organized people, energized people, a comprehensive plan, and a lot of money, it makes things happen in this country and around the world. And there's one group that has all of those things. Who are they? It's the NRA. It's the NRA. Last year, the NRA, they are full of energized people. They have now nearly 20 million dues-paying members. Let's be real. When was the last time you paid dues? Right? Very few of us. It takes dues-paying members. Last year, they spent nearly $350 million, which I did the research is more than the top 10 civil rights organizations combined. Their people are energized, they're organized, they operate from a plan. And listen, they're really good at what they do. Sure are. Divorce your emotion from what it is that they do and acknowledge that it works. I say that to say that we haven't brought to bear our best toward our most challenging problems. And so I'm hopeful because I don't think we've given all of the challenges in our community, I don't think we've given them the best that we have.
So I am not at all disagreeing. I want to kind of add to what Shaun was saying. And as Robyn was talking, I was thinking of a book that named The White Architects of Black Education, which the title in of itself is suggestive of who we are learning from. And I thought that in addition to, prior to organization, and this is one of the things that I learned when I was in prison, is belief. many of us don't believe that we can make a difference, or that things can change. And I've even had some of this conversation with people that call themselves social workers. I didn't see how you can be a social worker and not be optimistic, not believe that sooner or later things are going to change. And I tenaciously hold on to this concept that there's efficacy before agency. And I think part of the problem is that we lack belief. And I think that belief or faith or conviction is integral to who we are. And that aspect of ourselves has been taken away from us because we have stopped believing to some degree, not everybody, in ourselves. And I think this is part of the strategy. If you review even the Jefferson papers about divide and conquer, even the social construction of whiteness was about division. It was about dividing people up and accenting differences rather than accenting what about us is the same. And I think that for me, and part of my research with black men and even with respect to myself, was this notion of humanity, having our sense of humanity, our humanness, restored in our own eyes. And I think, in terms of, notion of oppression, internalized oppression, how do we, and I hate to use this term, but exorcise, like we got to get an exorcist and throw some water on us to get them devils out of us, you know what I'm saying? Because I think that is also, a part of the problem. Before you can organize, you have to, consciousness, you know what I mean? The formula, you know what I mean, in terms of and heighten our sense of awareness. We have to we can't keep thinking about the things the same way if we expect to do things differently. So I just want to add that piece.
Yeah, amen, brother. Amen, 100% to that. I think, as I was listening to both of you speak, the thing that kept coming to me is we don't have, like you were saying, an understanding of who we are, right? We have to start with affirmation of the fact that we are descendants of African kings and queens. A lot of us don't have an understanding of our history, and part of that is because we are trying to just deal with the micro and macro aggressions that we experience every single day and the trauma of being black in this country. It is so difficult, I am highly favored, highly educated, have an amazing position, and this white man came to my home and worked on my heater and said, "Do you own this home?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, No. Is this your house? Do you live here? I said, "Yes, this is, but did you buy this?" I mean, it's like, what? I can't even be in my home without being assaulted. And then I have to organize and pay dues and figure out how to collaborate. This is traumatic. And then I got to tell my white colleagues, don't try me today. Because I didn't even get out my house because the heater's broke. You understand? So I think one of the things that I try to do in mental health is affirm just how talented the person sitting across from me is. And if you weren't experiencing some type of outward manifestation of the internalized pain, I would really think you're crazy. But because you're in my office, I know that you are well and have the ability to get even better. So one of the things that I try to tell people, especially in the black community, is we need help. Mental health care, all right? We have this stigma that if we go and talk to a psychiatrist like myself or a social worker or a psychologist, that inherently we are crazy. And I say, if you don't talk to somebody, you will continue to stay unwell, right? So, even the word stigma, I think, takes away the stigma of stigma. Arthur Kleinman is a global mental health researcher. He calls it social death. And I think we are really dying as a black body because we are not properly getting the help we need. And again, full disclosure, I think the current existing healthcare, especially the mental health care system, is not for us. So we have to demand to see providers that make sense. So one of the things that's really nice is emotional emancipation circles, where you can talk openly and honestly, the American Psychological Association does this well, about the trauma of racism, how to affirm your history, who you are in a racist system, how to address the socialization of racism in order to deal with that pain, and then began to get treatment for your depression, which you didn't even know you had. You understand? So it's just hard, right? But I think until we are well psychologically, we can't do the work. We can't. And that's what we're seeing.
Can I ask everyone in this room, every black person in this room, who is 60 years or older, to stand up?
Now you had me.
Okay. There is a reason I asked you to do that. I'm probably the oldest person. I don't know, how old are you?
I ain't telling
But you know black don't crack, so you can tell them. Okay. So I am 66, and I have, black don't crack, okay? The face is deceptive, the body knows, okay? But the reason I asked you to stand up as I'm listening and as I'm mindful, because when you were sharing some dates, I'm thinking of my son who's 37, and I was just listening, and I remember sitting on the stage at Silberman, the school that I teach at, when there was a panel of young activists, all black women, and they had come to speak about something to the practice lab course that we both taught in. And they were sitting up on the stage, and I mean, every hairdo you can imagine, some of the most interesting outfits I have ever seen, and interesting is an interesting word. And they were sitting there, and without a script in their hand, were just sharing the most brilliant information. I mean, smart, didn't have notes, talking, just the way you guys sounded when you were speaking. And I remember sitting there pissed. I was pissed. Like, well, you know, that's supposed to be me up there talking. You know, who do these little whippersnappers think they are? I was really upset. And then I checked myself. And I said to myself, Robyn, this is no longer your leg of the journey. You ain't getting out there marching no more. Your marching days are over. I know I'm not marching anymore. I can still have the passion, but like I said, the body knows, okay? And so what I discovered in that moment, and I said to myself, I don't have to do that anymore. There is a different role for me to play. And I stood up after the women had presented, and I shared with them just what I said just now in terms of what my process had been. And I thanked them for sharing, and I internally recognized that they couldn't have been there in 2017 if I hadn't been back there in 1960-something. But what it also told me, and this is why I asked people over 60 to stand up, is when we're looking at solutions, we have a role to play. Because these young folks are out on the front line, giving their all. They are brilliant. They are organized. They have a vision, clarity. They don't have the same fear that we had. They are fearless in terms of taking on these institutions. And if we don't pull out the breast, if we don't sit back and say, come on home when you're tired, and let me take care of you and let me feed you, going to die and burn out. and 30 years from now, we'll be sitting here having the same conversation. So my commitment going forward, I'm real clear about this, is my role is to nurture, to give whatever little wisdom folks ask me for and are willing to hear and receive, and to encourage, and to motivate, and to feed, and most importantly, to love them. That's what I'm calling on my peers, the baby boomers, to do. We can do it from our rocking chairs. You know we ain't sitting in no rocking chairs. But that's what I think is what I would like to offer as our work as part of the solution.
Okay, so here's the last question. I'm about to be real creative. So one of the questions that I had actually wanted to pose to all of you is a very good segue from what you were talking about, that some would assert that one of the biggest challenges facing our community is our inability to transfer knowledge from one generation to another. I found myself thinking, though I am not 60, I'm somewhere between those groups, that there are things that for me were passed down that I see that our students don't have. So the question is, and many of the students asked a very similar question, so I'm going to try to consolidate it. The question is really around, you know, as a graduate student, where do we find our place in this fight? What do you think is the best way to affect change? And what are the top three, this is a specific, what are the top three professions that activists should try to join? Basically, the question is, how do we move forward? What is it that we do? And to the point that Shaun made about your gifts, how do we use those gifts that we have in order to move us forward? The sort of second part of that question, I know it doesn't really go together, but I thought it was really poignant as you talked about it, is does what we are talking about, the ability to mobilize and need to transfer knowledge and inform this generation of fighters what it is that they should be doing, do we believe that the United States is in the position for another civil rights movement? So as you think about all of those, that is our last question that I tried to combine.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm going to start because one of the things that I'm 62, since Robert done blew it up. So even though I'm 62 years old, I spent 32 years in the system of prison. I got my PhD at the Silverman School of Social Work, the Graduate Center in New York City. I work with black men on a regular basis that are in prison. I teach at the colleges. You have to go to the people. One of the things that we left outside was we are trying to begin an effort to amend the Constitution, basically the 13th Amendment, which suggests, as you said, that slavery shall be abolished except for those people convicted of a crime. Why do we need that punishment clause? Mm-hmm. Which suggests to me that nothing has changed. So long as this institutionalized slavery still exists, nothing has changed, particularly with respect to the justice system. So I do like the Farmers commercial. I say a thing or two because I know a thing or two. And a lot of times when I be talking with the students, they laugh. They say, yo, you crazy. But that's how I engage them. Because what I'm telling them is the truth based on experience. It's not those things that you've read in the book. We use the book for conversation, but I have to tell you about life because I want you to succeed, as I say, on the other side of the door more so than I want you to get a grade. So I think that, you know, the role that we play, you know, just like Robyn said, you know, I feel like a big brother, like a mentor, like somebody that needs to be there saying that I still believe. And if I did not believe, I would still be in prison. If I did not believe, I would not have guys in prison still writing me letters, looking mainly for hope. Hope is what keeps them alive. And I think that we need, as a community of people, hope has never died. The hope of our grandmothers that, as they say, that pray for us. My mom, she's 88. Her brother's 94. They still are happy about me getting my degree. So we still can inspire those that are in front of us to keep on, to keep holding on, to keep inspiring us, because that's our task for those people that are behind us. They need to believe. They don't need to be in a situation where they give up hope. And so if they can see, like, they call me OG, old time, they call me all kinds of names. They call me grandpa, and I resent that. Because I ain't really feeling that. And I tell them, come to the gym, and I'm going to show you a little something. But that's what it is. We have to continue to, like the thing that I saw a movie about the Defiance, about the Jews that were wandering in the forest. And one of the most important things that was said in that movie is to remember community. We have to regroup and remember that we are a community. And of course, we have different understandings about what that means. But it means, as I generally begin, all my classes by saying, I am because we are, and we are because I am. I believe that. That's what keeps me humble. That's what keeps me going to school, no matter what school I've been going to, continuing. Because if we don't believe that, if we don't believe that we are each other, if we embrace what our oppressors have taught us, if we continue to internalize that, then we will lose. And I'm about winning.
All right.
And we are about, and we use that terminology because we're in a capitalist society. Some people tell me to stop saying that. Win, succeed, we're going to get it done. And that's what I believe, and I think that that's what we need to pass forward. Our resistance was not rebellion. Who embraces being inside of a cage? An animal will bark and make noise because we resist. And so we cannot embrace how people label our actions as being rebellious, as being uppity, as being whatever the names that they choose to call us in order to get us to stop. Because that's all people want to do. The justice system is a system of control. And that's all they seek to do. That's all they've ever sought to do ever since 1865, when they no longer had us on the plantation. It has forever been a system of containment. Even if it's a myth, the whole notion about the King Alfred plan, COINTELPRO, all these things about how do we control these people. And often, just like in South Africa, they just remembering all the things that they have done. And fear is what motivates them the most. But we are loving people. We've never put on a shirt and tie and went out on a picnic to watch somebody roast on a fire. It's just not human. That's not us. And so as we begin to try to move forward, we have to be careful not to become that which we say we hate the most. Yes. So these are some things, we continue to have to check ourselves, look into the mirror in order to be ourselves. We have to find ourselves. But we find ourselves in each other. And that's what we're looking for, who we are outside of ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And we cannot be afraid of being who we are. And so I have a concept, and you might want to steal this, Doc. I call it mirror therapy. Mirror therapy. I look in the mirror, and I have a conversation with me.
Amen.
And you know what? I love me. You know what I'm saying? And that in and of itself is significant because we have been taught to hate ourselves. And because we hate ourselves, we try to be everybody other than who we are. So that in and of itself was an accomplishment. And I believe, and I'm sharing what Robyn said, we have to, to bring the love to the table. And that's really a part of our strength. That's what holds us together. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Hey.
we're done.
All right. Yeah, he's like, that was a drop the mic moment. Yeah, listen. Ooh.
I mean, the only thing I will say is you know, the revolution will not be televised, right? So we know that. And I think to directly try to address the question of how do we pass on information, I mean, part of it is just, for me, learning from those that came before me, right? So when I was selected to be on this panel, I was so humbled. I said, I don't even deserve to be on the panel with these great people, really. And I went and did my due diligence. And I told Dr. Brown-Manning, I know who you are already, because I was already just feeling so privileged to be a part of this panel, but also seeing a black woman who has survived what it is to be a black woman and do the work longer than I've been alive. It's important for me, right, to do my due diligence, to figure out how does she get where she is? How does she navigate, right? So part of it is just staying in community, reading, which no one likes to do, about who came before, how they navigated this racist system to get where they are, still be loving, and not lose the essence of blackness during the process. Just yesterday, I was at Yale. Nothing was done for Department of Psychiatry for Black History Month. I said, come on over, y'all. I've been in this house 2 months. Come on over. I don't got furniture. But we are going to honor Solomon Collier Fuller, one of the first black psychiatrists in this country. We are going to honor his legacy, and we are going to talk about what it is to be black faculty, residents, and interns at Yale University. And we are going to share knowledge. There were people from younger than me all the way up to 70s in my living room talking about survival solutions and how to remain in academia. They're not going to organize it. We have to do it ourselves. And it might not be on Twitter. I don't even know the latest thing. Facebook Live, Instagram, Snapchat. It'll happen in our homes, our institutions, in the spaces that we create amongst ourselves. The only other thing I want to say, and I'll stop because I am just full. I got fed today at UConn Law. Thank you very much. The top 3 professions. Be excellent. I really believe that God gives us talents and skills. Shaun King didn't even know that he would be on this stage. He thought he was going to stay as a teacher. It doesn't matter what profession. There's no top 3 professions. The Lord will see fit to use you for your greatest good. You know, the most important thing is to consistent with your values, your morals, the thing that motivates you, and stay connected to the ancestors and to the elders. I think with that, you can't lose. You can't lose.
Thank you. So they are giving me the high sign. So let's give it up for our wonderful, wonderful panelists. Shaun, I know really quickly, one question we didn't get to is folks want to know about your PAC. Can you just give the information for how they can?
I'll be brief. Real quickly, somebody asked about something that we started just last week. And it's particularly relevant here at the law school. We started a political action committee, a PAC, and it's to replace America's prosecutors. And the United States has 2,400 elected prosecutors. And those 2,400 prosecutors are really the gatekeepers of America's justice system. And I wrote a piece this past week that really broke down what that means. But in my assessment of the justice system, there are many important parts and pieces and people, but no single person plays a bigger role in who is prosecuted and how they are prosecuted, where people are sent, and diversion programs, employment programs, or prison or whatever. No single person plays a larger role than your local elected prosecutor. Shockingly, or not, they're 95% white. The 2,400 prosecutors, they are 81% male and overwhelmingly conservative, including in cities and states that often like to brag about being progressive, but are often just progressive in name only. And it's deeply problematic. They are not just the gatekeepers, they are the enforcers and architects of local justice. And they've done great harm to our people and to our communities. However, most of us can't name our local DA. And I want you to understand that that's on purpose. The system operates with a degree of anonymity because it allows a particular class of people to maintain their power. So we're building a national network to begin to flip those seats, not just so that America's prosecutors look like us, because there are actually some bad black prosecutors and some amazing white prosecutors. However, America's prosecutors should look like America. Less than 1%, mind blown, less than 1% of those 2,400 DAs are women of color. That's all women of color, not just black women, all women, less than 1% of America's prosecutors. And so we need to diversify on every level, race, gender, nationality, background, culture, but we need to find people whose primary objective is to end mass incarceration. And our PAC has already done that in 2 places. One was in Philadelphia, and one was in Portsmouth, Virginia. Last year, we helped manage the campaign of a brilliant civil rights attorney named Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. Larry Krasner is about the craziest civil rights attorney. He has prosecuted the Philadelphia Police Department, sued rather, 85 times, and has never been a prosecutor. And he is now the district attorney of Philadelphia. But let me tell you what he did. He was inaugurated in January. He won with a significant mandate. And in his first week in office, he fired 21 attorneys from his office who said that they were not going to place ending mass incarceration as their main priority. He fired them, 21 of them. No DA has ever done that. Just yesterday, he announced that he was ending cash bail in Philadelphia. And I don't have to unpack it for you. You're here, but so many people are innocent people are in jail just because they can't pay their bail. Last week, he immediately dismissed all marijuana arrests, every one of them. All marijuana arrests, every single one. And the second person that we arrested is an amazing black woman, 36-year-old black woman. Her name is Stephanie Morales, and people hear her name and think that she's Latino, but she married a Dominican man, but Stephanie Morales is an African-American woman, and she was the district attorney in Portsmouth, Virginia. And in 2015, she was the only district attorney in the country that charged a police officer with murder and convicted him. And law schools around the country had created this idea that if a DA ever did what she did, that DA could never be reelected. And so she was up for reelection in 2016, and we helped manage her campaign, and she won reelection. And so there are 2,400 prosecutors, and those are 2 of them, okay? But it's a start. And we created this PAC because it's not a reactionary plan. It's a proactive plan to strategize around local elections and to put people in power who don't just want to maintain the current system, but want to radically, basically tear it down and rebuild it from scratch. And that's what Larry and Stephanie are doing in Philadelphia and Portsmouth. And I was in Dallas yesterday. There's an amazing black woman named Elizabeth Frizzell. She is a brilliant judge. She's been a judge in Dallas for 20 years. And she is just like Larry and Stephanie, but in Dallas. And we're going to run these races. And I'll close with this thought. Most of our institutions of power, our local schools, our HBCUs, our fraternities and sororities, our churches and religious organizations. I wrote about this today, and it'll be out. I am the writer in residence at Harvard Law School right now, and I wrote a piece for this that should be out tomorrow in our publication. All of our people in all of their positions of power, because of very complicated tax laws, are not allowed to tell you who to vote for. And it creates, unintentionally, our pastors can't get on the mic and say, listen, this district attorney is corrupt, and we need you to put in place so-and-so and so-and-so. Any of our positions of power, because of tax law, if they say such a thing, they'll be in violation of the law. They could lose their 501c3 status or the like. Well, here's what ends up happening. Our political strategy gets dumbed down, and we basically end up with a message that sounds like this, and you've heard it before: go vote. And here's what Go Vote has done for us. Go Vote has made 95% of the prosecutors white. Go Vote has Donald Trump as president and Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. Go Vote is not a political strategy. Okay, it's something you put on a button. It's not even a good tweet, right? And because of tax law, that ends up being what pastors say from the mic. It ends up being what school presidents and law school deans say: I want you to vote. And people assume, well, I guess that means vote Democratic. Well, in Dallas, for instance, there are 3 Democrats running for DA. Well, if all you said was go vote, and the people said, well, I'll vote Democrat, literally, I've done the studies on it, people will go in, you've done it. You have gone in and just picked names. They're like, they sound nice. But that's what we're doing. Picking, sometimes I'll go in and I'll just pick all the women. Just saying, like, men are a mess. But even that, like, that's not a nuanced strategy. And so we formed the PAC because we have not created as a community, we are masters of organizations that prohibit us from saying the full truth we have to say. And it's boxed us in a little bit or a lot. And so because we are a political action committee, tax law allows us to say whatever we want to say. And it gives us the freedom. When you donate to us, you don't get a tax deduction, and that's the only difference. But it allows us the freedom to say what we want to say, and we're going to focus on these DA's races. And you'll see it all over my timeline on Facebook and Twitter and the like. And I'm not asking you to donate or anything else, but if you are interested, you can go to realjusticepac.org and just check it out and see what we're doing. It's very interesting. I'm one of the co-founders, but it's a brilliant team of men and women that we've put together. All right? Thank you.
All right, everyone. Before we get kicked out of the building, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of time to come up and meet with our speakers. But before we get to that, the Boston family wanted to recognize our Vice President, Khadijah Kelly, who without her, this event would not have been as successful as it is. And we have a gift for you on behalf of the Boston family.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for my Balsa family for supporting me in this event. I did my research, and so I brought you the best of the best, and I'm very proud of the panel that we put together tonight. I should recognize our Balsa alumni that are in the building. Night of Inspiration started with you, and we are only continuing the tradition that you started, so thank you.
Additionally, we wanted to thank our speakers, and we have gifts for all of them as well. Give it to 'em. No, yeah, there we go.
Okay. Well, thank you, man.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, wow, we're surprised. Glad I bought the car. Thank you. Wow.
I personally wanted to thank the rest of the Balsa family, both current and alumni, for coming out here with your mentorship, especially alumni, with your mentorship. A lot of us wouldn't have been as successful in this event without you guys. I want to thank the Balsa E-Board, who has been working for months on this project and made it successful as well. And I want to thank you all for coming out here tonight. And one more round of applause for all our speakers, please.